WestLINK.
Welcome to WestLINK, where we connect to talk about relevant topics. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and I would like to invite you to please like, comment, and subscribe to our Toronto West channel. I'm your host today, Tyffany Ambrose. I am someone who is passionate about outreach. I am a self proclaimed activist and a wannabe philanthropist. And I'm hosting today because I'm very passionate about the topic today, passionate about Black history in general, but definitely about diving deeper and learning new things about our Black history. Today's program is on the topic of Juneteenth. Juneteenth is an African American holiday that originated in the US, and it has very much significance to today and to Black history, how it shaped our culture, and something we should all celebrate and we should all be educated about. Today we have a lovely panel of guests, a lovely panel of guests for you who are educated and ready to talk about this topic so we can learn more and educate our community. Today we're going to bring on our first guest. This is Greg Burkett. Hey, Greg.
Hey, how are you?
Beautiful intro. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Maintaining, my friend, maintaining.
All right, so tell me about yourself. Give me a little tidbit about yourself. Why are you here today? Who is Greg?
Well, I am an educator and a playwright and poet. I teach high school. I'm also a guidance counselor, and I've authored or helped to author a Black History textbook. I also write content for CBC Kids website, and father, husband, and follower of God.
All right. Our next guest today is going to be Megan Bennett.
Hey, Tiffany.
Hey,
Hey.
Megan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. You look comfy. I know you're doing good. You're doing better than me. So give us a little intro. Who is Megan? Why are you here today?
Absolutely. So I wear many hats. But primarily I am an educator in the community. I'm a nonprofit director. I'm also an anti-Black racist like instructor, but also like a DEI specialist. So what that is centering Black youth and young adults, but also working with whether it's small businesses or other nonprofits with understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really important in our society today. I'm also a workshop facilitator, and it does focus on anti-Black racism, combating anti-Black racism. And we also incorporate educating the community about the socioeconomic and sociocultural aspect of Black Canadian history. So that is all encompassed in my nonprofit, the Black Outreach Collective, but also I do that for work as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so a little shameless plug. It's called the Black Outreach Collective. That is the name of her organization. Make sure you guys check it out. We'll leave links later if you guys check it out, but it's a really good initiative for you guys to get involved with.
Appreciate that.
And last but not least, our last guest is going to be Esther Gooden.
Hi guys, hey Tiff, hey Megan, hey Greg, how's everyone doing?
Esther. All right, you give us a little intro, Esther. Who is Esther? Why are you here today?
Well, I don't wear as many hats as you guys, but I am currently in school for broadcast television videography. Basically, I do like the arts and the media, and I always, by being in this industry, I like to do stuff that I'm passionate about, which is also Black history. I am trying to dig deep, always educate myself. I feel like it's really important. Knowledge is power, so it's always good to educate, and that's what I like about this today.
Absolutely. So we have a great discussion in store for you guys today. But before we get into all the fun, we're gonna take a quick commercial break and we'll get right into the action after. All right, we are back. So let's get right into the action. Let's start off. What is Juneteenth, anyways? What is Juneteenth? Let's get a little bit of history about it. Can anybody hop in and tell us what is Juneteenth? Let's start with Greg.
So my understanding of Juneteenth, it's a fusion of two words, June the 19th. So June 19th, 1865, the Union soldiers, this is at the tail end of the American Civil War. So the Union soldiers, those who were fighting for the side of the North, made it all the way to Texas. And Texas at that time was, I believe, the furthest west in the United States, and they made it there, and they were able to tell the enslaved, as well as the governing officials in Texas, that enslavement had been indeed abolished. Now, I should say that the governing officials in Texas knew that enslavement had been abolished and that the Civil War had ended. I believe it was 2 months prior to their arrival in Texas, but they were still carrying on business as usual. So the enslaved continued to be enslaved. And when the North soldiers arrived, the Union soldiers arrived, they then made it very clear that enslavement had indeed been abolished and that Black people were to be given the rights of full citizenship in the United States.
All right. Esther, do you have anything to add about that? What do you know about Juneteenth? Do you have any history? What is it commemorating?
So as I recently found out not too long ago, so I did try to dig on the topic because I was quite curious to be like, how can this atrocity just continue after the law has been passed? And as I was reading up on it, I found some interesting things about the fact that how it kind of continued, like the excuses that they used was kind of disgusting. I mean, and how the trade worked. From what I know, is that how it kind of went. They were trading like us as objects, so it was kind of like tobacco, and then how we would be shipped from Africa to here. It was kind of working in a triangle fact. So that's as I know how it was continued, which is kind of sad, but it was more kind of nice to see how the North Union kind of said, no, 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 this is not right. Like, pump your brakes. Like, you guys are free. So it's kind of nice that we got that message and stuff. Because imagine if it
Absolutely.
was,
Slavery,
it would have
slavery
still,
was just one big business trade. There was,
yeah.
oh, sorry. I
Oh,
think we're
what? No, no,
losing
no.
our,
Continue. You didn't interrupt me. Go, go, go.
okay, sorry, girl. No, honestly, absolutely. Slavery was one big business trade. We were traded and sold like if we were commodities, like if we were a form of currency, essentially, right? And that's how it worked. You know, it was one big business trade of foreign affairs, and to where we were taken from Africa, right, and brought over to the U.S. and the U.S. traded, spices, sugar, and tobacco to Europe, and Europe in turn gave then tariffs and money and stuff like that back to Africa. But it essentially was this big business exchange. Megan, do you have anything you want to add about the history of Juneteenth?
Yeah. So I did chip out for a second, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything, but the holiday was first recognized statewide in Texas, in Galveston, Texas, and There was a lot of polarization in the political warfare in the United States, and it wasn't even united at the time. It was known as, America. You had um, the Confederate States, which are known as the states in the South, and there were the Union States, which were known as the Northern States, and they had to actually come down, as you guys mentioned, to Texas and tell all of like 250,000 slaves at the time that you are now free. So it's very symbolic, and it's a really powerful form of celebration, because to know that you are free and to understand that you are free, and you're free, like truly free, legally free, is very powerful, especially if you're unaware of it. So I believe on June 16th, 2022, the I think it was Joe Biden signed a bill to like pretty much say that it is a federal state holiday, and this was in 2021. So just to show you how it is now being honored like nationwide for America.
It deserves to be 100%.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Mhm.
And even just to add on to that, I know a lot of things have been said before, but like the entire, like, obviously I'm not American. I don't know the entire back history to the Civil War, but a big part of it was because you know the South didn't want to give up slavery. They didn't want to. That was one of the things they were fighting for. Like, no, we want to remain having slaves. Or like, imagine being so like stuck in your roots that you're like, no, we want to fight and die for slavery. Like that's kind of crazy. But
Yeah.
it came to that point, and when Abraham Lincoln said, listen, they're free, the South didn't want to acknowledge them as his leader and didn't want to acknowledge it as an actual ruling. So when Civil War happened and the North eventually won, that's when the decree actually came into full effect and it applied to everybody because that's how cookie crumbled at the end of the day.
And to add to
But that's such important. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. And to add to what you were saying, a lot of the Confederate states, they upheld traditional values of white supremacy and white dominance. So it was very ingrained in Confederate states. In fact, like they were fighting like they were fighting Congress to separate from the entire United States. They wanted to be their
Yeah.
own. That's exactly why you meet that form of resistance, and that's why America today is so polarized, because of the different views, and
Hmm.
the idea of white purity and white dominance that is very ingrained. So I think that that's the challenge that we see the repercussions of that issue today. And during the Civil War, Canadian soldiers, I know, like, even indigenous soldiers, there's so many different soldiers that came to support and actually fought in the Civil War. So it's very powerful on how they fought for equality and equity.
Exactly, which just goes into our next question of why is it important? Like, why should we care about Juneteenth? Like, what? Why is it an important holiday? Why is it something we should acknowledge? That goes right into it.
I feel like
And
it's so
even like
important.
Megan was just saying, right? It's crazy because to see how divided the United States still are, and even still, we still see Confederate flags and still see that, and that's all deep rooted and deep seated from way back in 1865, and all that divisiveness has
Ooh, she's frozen for me. I'm not sure if it's for anyone.
I thought I was the only one.
Yes.
Um, but no, she is right. She does have a point
Mhm.
about why Z wrote it. And I think it's really important that. Sorry, I was just going to continue the conversation until
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
but the thing is that it's really important now that it's acknowledged, because the fact is that, like, I feel like as a Black person, now we're kind of filling the quota as much as say as was now, like people are really acknowledging Black people and really saying, oh wow, these are the atrocities you've been through and stuff like that. And I feel like now in like 2022 a lot of these stuff are coming out, because the thing is, like, back then we weren't really acknowledged before. Like, even after Juneteenth happened, okay, we're free, there was still a lot of segregation, there's still a lot of problems, we weren't fully acknowledged. Because the thing is, it's like what they said is like, okay, fine, we may not be able to have you as slaves, but you can't ride our bus, you can't be with us, you can't drink from our fountains, we'll spray you with water, kind of stuff like that. You can't eat at our restaurants. But it's now the fact of the Juneteenth is so important because now this is like the starting step. Like, okay, you battled this law. Now what's the next one to come? And you know what I'm saying? And it really just shows how strong Black people are, because no matter what we go through, we're still here. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't wipe out our existence. And that's what I kind of like about like the Black culture, is because we're really strong as people. And even us ourselves, we never give ourselves enough credit. So when it comes to these holidays, it's so important to celebrate it, because you have to think about it. You're celebrating just a part of yourself, even though we haven't went through slavery ourselves. Our people went through it, you know. And so what if it didn't happen in Canada? Your ancestors went through it. That was like what it is. So that's why we have to keep it like important, and to keep like acknowledging these kind of stuff, like every little holiday we can.
I hear that. Yeah, I also think it's really important to celebrate all of the wins for anyone of Afro descent. As
Yeah,
Afro, whether you're Afro Caribbean or you're African American or you're Black Canadian, this Emancipation Day, this Freedom Day is significant. It is symbolic because it is showing us that we can fight to make legislative changes. And we should care about it, because a win for African Americans is a win for all peoples of African descent.
it's
So
true.
the more we recognize these symbolic events in history, the more we can work together to fight against other forms of systemic racism. We can explore the history of African Americans and Afro Caribbeans, understanding, how the African slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade has affected Black Canadians today, because we don't often look into how African Americans have actually moved to Canada and have been a pillar of the Black Canadian community for so many years. When we consider people like Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, one of the first African American and Black Canadians that started first of all the taxi cab system.
Yeah.
Those are African Americans who came to Canada and who have established networks and resources so that we can thrive till this day. So it's important for us to recognize that.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely. So history explains the past, or it informs the past, and it explains the present, and then gives us an understanding of the future. And it's really frustrating for me to see how there's this dialogue between Black people in our diaspora about forgetting about enslavement and not talking about enslavement, and everything is just looking forward and speaking towards Black excellence, which is very important. But for us to move forward, we have to understand where we came from. And I don't believe that sorry, I'm not sure if we're frozen. Can you guys hear me?
I
Yeah,
can hear
we hear
but
you
you're
fine.
just
You are glitching a little bit, but we hear you clearly. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, hear me?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I don't know that there are other ethnic groups that fight. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good
Okay,
now.
I don't know if
you
there are
did
other
switch
ethnic
out for a
groups
bit,
that
but you're
fight so
good.
much with regards to not embracing this. Wow. I don't
I'm
know.
so sorry that's happening to you.
Can,
It
Yeah,
just keeps glitching
it
in and out.
is, especially when you're really into what you're saying.
Yeah, you seem good now. Yeah,
He's still frozen for me.
yeah, it just froze again.
The internet's coming after us all.
hello.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
good now.
I hear you.
Yeah, yeah. So you're good now. Yeah,
Can you guys hear?
Yeah.
yeah,
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was saying basically that I don't think that there are other ethnic groups. Okay. I don't think that there are other ethnic groups that fight over commemorating the challenges that they face like we do, right? A couple of years ago, we had a lot of movies coming out about enslavement. It was when Birth of a Nation and all these other movies were coming out. And Snoop Dogg all of a sudden says, you know what? I'm tired of all of these movies about slavery. We just need to move forward. And to me, it's just, I don't understand. You couldn't tell the Jewish people to stop celebrating the Passover, acknowledging the Passover. And their enslavement happened well before ours, right? You couldn't tell them to stop acknowledging the Holocaust, right? And happened many years ago as well. One of the reasons you have to understand what happened to us and acknowledge it is so that it doesn't happen again, right? And so that you can mobilize, as Megan was saying, we're talking about the diaspora coming together to fight against our shared injustice, the reality of our shared injustice, right? So we can't just forget about and do away with the things that happened to us in the past, as painful as they are. We have to acknowledge them going forward so that we know how to combat our reality, our present reality, and to ensure that things are better for our progeny going forward as well.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And I feel like also it also reminds you of that there's also different types of enslavement. I mean, we may not be enslaved physically, but we also could be enslaved mentally. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a system, and we need to understand that and why history, which is true what Greg said, it's so important because it shows why it is what it is today. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand because history, I believe, is one of the greatest knowledges that anyone has to maintain. Like, you have to know history for you to just be able to live life. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's because it starts from there. And the thing is, because a lot of us now, we don't acknowledge how school is so important, that why we repeat a lot of the stuff today. Because sometimes I'll be on the media and I'm like, wait, but this is the same thing that happened in 1966. Why are we doing it again? Kind of thing. So you are right. It's really important. And I feel like this is important for us to celebrate all the time.
Absolutely. So I know someone mentioned,
as everyone can see, we are having some challenges, some technical difficulties. So we are going to go to a song, and we will be back shortly, and hopefully we'll get some things straightened out for you. Thank you all so much for bearing with us. WestLINK, keep it locked.
me come in. Doors are fastened and the windows pinned. Keep your hand on that plow and hold on.
Laura said you done lost your track. You can't plow straight and keep on looking back. Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on.
Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hands on that plow and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hands on that plow and hold on. Every had a golden chain, every link spelled with Jesus' name. Keep your hand on that plow and hold on. Hold that chain and never tire. Every rung goes higher and higher. Keep your hands on that plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on. Hold on.
Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on. Hold on.
Hold on.
Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on. If you wanna get to heaven, let me tell you how. Just to keep your hand on that gospel plow. Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on.
Pull that chain and never tie. Every round goes higher and higher. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hand on that plow and hold on.
All right, so we are back. Great songs we just heard. We're gonna get right back into it. So before the break, we were talking a bit about what Juneteenth is, why it's important. So now we want to bring a little closer to home. So how does Juneteenth relate to us in Canada? Why should we as Canadians care about Juneteenth? It happened in the U.S. When I talk to a lot of people over here, Black people, I ask them, oh, what do you know about Juneteenth? Like Juneteenth, they either never heard about it, or it's, oh, we don't care about that. That's the U.S.'s holiday. That doesn't relate to us. And I get taken aback because, first of all, when a lot of people from a lot of the slaves that were freed from slavery in the South, they came up north, right? So whether they came up north to the northern U.S. or they came up north to Canada, right? They came up. So there very well may be some people who were free from Juneteenth in Canada. Also, for the fact that Black history is Black history, period. Whether it happened in Europe, whether it happened in Germany, Australia, or Canada, Black history is relevant to Black people everywhere. It doesn't matter where it happened, it affected you directly or not. It's Black history, period. And that's something I think we need to adopt more of that mentality of it doesn't matter if it happened, in Timbuktu. It's important because everything that happens to Black people shapes the experience for all of us worldwide. It's like a domino effect. Everything affects everything, which is why I always say that. So maybe you guys can weigh in a bit here. Why should we, as Canadians, care about this U.S. holiday? Why should we care about Juneteenth? Why should people in general care?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like for Black Canadians, or even Canadians of Afro descent or Afro Caribbean descent, I know we touched on this before, but caring and understanding the history of different sectors of the African diaspora is symbolic. It's emancipation for all of us, because we are taking into consideration how their identity is affected and how we can help and how we can support. I know that for a lot of Black Canadians, we're very familiar with our own history, but African American history is tied into Black Canadian history. I know I mentioned Lucy and Thornton Blackburn, the first African Americans who came up with the taxi cab system for Toronto, which was known as York from before. And we talk about so many Black Canadian icons, and we don't even know that they're actually African American. And so when we consider that they are a pillar of our Canadian society, we're owing them the respect that they deserve. They have worked very hard for emancipation, and that's something that should be recognized.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of professionals, Black professionals today, that are descendants of African Americans who were either judges. I know, I've interestingly enough, I met and her name slipped me. I met a woman whose grandfather was one of the first judges to become one of the judges in Canada or in Ontario, and that was very notable for her because they have paved the way. They have went over all of the stumbling blocks so that their kids and their grandkids could be able to walk that path as well. So we need to acknowledge trailblazers, whether we are African Americans or not, whether we're Black Canadians. We need to acknowledge that day of emancipation.
I actually have something to add in there about why else we should care. It's like, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this is just my personal opinion. So in my humble opinion, I feel like a lot of the stuff that America does sometimes, I don't want to say Canada tries to copy, but we try to make our own red and white version. And when I look, people forget that as much as it happened in America, you see all the universities and stuff that they built. We did that. In slavery times, we built those universities. We built everything there that mostly that they have. So then if you look at even the blueprints and the architect of what some of the universities look like, you could compare it to ours. And, I don't want to stumble over and say oh yeah, I mean, we didn't create them ourselves. I mean, we did, but we also needed somewhere to start. And if you look at some of the universities, if you look at their, I forget what it's called, but like their foyers, their front foyers, if you look at certain universities, they look a lot like theirs. And obviously, everyone, and as any creator, anyone could say, if you're a media creator, architect, whatever, you also, when you look to ideas, sometimes you kind of take someone's idea and make it into your own. That's also what creators does, that's what artists do. That's why we have so much music genres and so on. So when we look at the architect, of course, someone may have originally made them their idea, but of course they probably looked and said, oh, this front foyer, oh, they have marble, let's try using this. So the thing is that also comes into what we're doing. A lot of the North, because remember, we're also considered like North America. So we're now a North American culture. So the thing is that obviously we
coexisting.
Coexist. Yeah, we kind of.
Exactly.
So obviously, sometimes the stuff that happens there will happen here. We're very minimal. Same,
very intertwined. Canada's intertwined a lot with the U.S., which is why it's so mind-boggling, because in the Black community, there's so much division already as it is. If you're African, if you're Caribbean, if you're not this, not that, and there's so much division. And even within all that, there's still colorism, and there's still all your light skin, dark skin, brown skin. There's so much division, and if we keep categorizing things, oh, as that's, that's American Black history, that's Canadian Black history, and that's European. We're going to stay divided. It's
Yeah.
not German Black history, it is Black
Yeah.
history, period. And we need to be knowledgeable about those things, because like I said, everything, it's like a domino effect. Things that happen over there, they affect things over here, and vice versa. And that is how Martin Luther King did not walk in these streets of Ontario. He wasn't here. It happened in the United States, right? However, because of those things, Canada and the rest of the world followed suit, and vice versa, right? The things that happen in Canada affect other parts of the world. To happen over there affect over here, which is why it's so important to look at it as Black history, because everything affects everybody, every one of us, light skin, dark skin, fat, skinny, tall, short, all of us.
Of all intersections.
Exactly.
Sure.
Right. And I feel like
Yeah.
that is why we should care as Black people about Black history that even happened to us. You
Yeah.
know? Okay, Greg is back. Greg, goody.
Welcome back.
And even just, just to refer back to that song, Hold On, such a powerful song. And
Yeah.
honestly, the undertones of that song reminds me of Negro spirituals.
Yeah.
Right, a lot of the slaves, of course, even enslavement, we sung those songs still to this day, for hope, for strength, and those originate from the church. And the church played a central role in the Black community. It always has, it always will be. So I think it's interesting to talk about what role has the church played. How can we talk about that? The church has played this role in the past, in the present, and the future. What do you guys think? What kind of role do you think the church has played in the Black community, whether it's enslavement or not enslavement? But what do you think they've played in the past, in the present, in the future? Give me your ideas.
Well, the church was the first place where Black people could actually have autonomy, right? Meaning that it was the first place that their leadership was actually recognized. It was the first place where they could actually be given positions of authority, right? So if we're talking about even Juneteenth, the first Juneteenth celebrations actually happened in church, because it was one of the only places or institutions where Black people could legally gather in large numbers, right? So again, connecting it to the holiday of Juneteenth, or the acknowledgement of Juneteenth, the church led out where that was concerned. When you think about the civil rights movement, the leadership really came from the church, again, because that's where Black people were able to exercise autonomy and be put in leadership positions and be acknowledged as leaders. And that happened in the United States, in Canada, in England, in the Caribbean as well. Wherever Black people in diaspora were in societies, the church was the central part of, it was the hub, right? This is where you would go. And when we even think about the church that we belong to, Toronto, it basically was the heartbeat of the community for an immigrant community, Black immigrants coming to Canada in the 50s and 60s, again, being denied access to housing. A lot of people don't know this, but in Toronto at that time, Black people were discriminated against with regards to where they could live, right? And we don't talk about that much. So again, the church became central because it was a place where people would tell you about job opportunities, housing. They would help you navigate the education system. So church has always been and will continue to be the lifeblood. A lot of people don't see church as relevant now to the Black struggle, and that's a whole nother topic that we could get into, because people often try to equate particularly Christianity with it being an oppressive system, right? And that's because people have misused Christianity to try to continue to condone oppression as well as systemic racism. But the church nonetheless still remains a place and a voice in the Black community.
I think you've done a really good job of outlining, the role of the church in the past, right? And has a source of strength, source of community, and a real foundation for all of us. Esther, how do you think the role of the church is in the Black community in the present day? How do you think it is functioning right now?
Honestly, I feel like it still does play a role, but sadly, I don't think it plays as big of a role as it did before. Because I feel like now, as people, as we continue on the generation, as we talked about, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, this part doesn't matter, that part doesn't matter, so this doesn't matter. And we're coming up with a whole bunch of casualties. So I feel like how the Black community used to be like the strong, like I think of it as like a home base, basically. Like, because as we always say, sanctuary is supposed to be where you want to. You know, with God, when you're feeling not at peace with yourself, God could always help you out. And I feel like as a when it was in the past for the Black community, that was our stronghold. That's what kept us going. But I feel like now that it just seems like, I don't want to say casualty, but it's not really the one that keeps us going. Like I feel like now we're putting our faith in other things, like in different, like, oh, maybe the law, okay, well, they're not going to put us in slavery again because, you know, da 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 da, and this, and they're filling up their minds with all kind of different politics and stuff. But I'm like, that's not true. The world could switch on you at any moment. Nothing's definite. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, as much as, you know, it may not happen at the snap of a finger, there's always stuff set in place where it could slowly turn on you. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like as a church, we need to kind of strengthen that to be like, you know what? Even if the world were to burn, we still got each other. You know, we're still family. This is your still home base. This is your sanctuary. And I feel like that's what we need to do. And the thing is, we are really connected to the community though, which we believe that could be a very strong household to like go back to how it was in the past and to be, because even in like Black History Month is the perfect time where we are so Black strong withheld. The thing would be nicer though if we keep those, because I don't know if you guys remember how when they would do it in Black History Month and you get to participate in all the activities, like, you know, the African drumming and all kind of stuff. I feel like if we even continue with that, that could strengthen
all year round.
Yeah, you know, if we continue, like even simple activities. I'm not saying it has to be every Saturday, like every afternoon. No. But if we still have little lessons in AY, even saying, oh, okay, well, today we're focused on John Henry. You know, he died of exhaustion because this. He was standing up for rights and stuff. Stuff like that, like little tips like that. It could really impact people. You never know. Like it could really inspire people. And the thing is, we don't know what's going on every day in other African Americans or Black people's lives. And, you know, hearing just these little stories, you could think like, oh, I could do this too, you know. You never know. So stuff like that, I feel like that could really help and strengthen back to what we used to be, or even be better than what it used to be.
Absolutely. I totally agree. We need to stop keeping Black history confined to 1 month. Black history is us. We are Black history. And every day we live, we create Black history. So it should be an everyday thing all year round, a lifestyle even. And I 100% agree. Megan, how do you think the role of the church in the Black community can be played in the future going forward?
I do think the church does have work to do in creating safer spaces for all Black people, and safer spaces meaning, you know, whatever you're feeling, whatever you want to develop, you can do that in the church. And the more we develop leaders, the more we develop trailblazers, is the more we can go out into community and help reach people in the world. We talk about outreach a lot, and outreach is very important. But at the same time, there is a lot of work that we have to do to make sure it maintains a safe space for Black spirituality. And what I mean by Black spirituality is decolonized Christianity.
Yeah.
And due to, you know, the racism, due to systemic racism, it has affected institutions like the church as well. And Christianity had become very colonized. And that is a fact that we have to face and understand how to navigate that. So once we decolonize Christianity and we create a safer space within the church, we can develop more leaders so that they can go out and educate others.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I want to jump on if I can. Megan made an amazing point there. And I think what the church has to do to some degree is rebrand itself because of the fact that we're connected to this white patriarchal system, right? And because of the fact that during enslavement, the Bible was misused, right, and was interpreted in a way to support what was being done to us. There are a lot of people and a lot of groups that really do not care to hear anything that we have to say as a church. And I think we have to rebrand ourselves. One of the ways that we need to do that is, again, through education. I think it was Esther who was talking about how important education is. It's really tantamount and paramount to what we can do going forward. If we can explain, actually, let me say really quickly, last Black History Month, I had the opportunity to speak to the seniors at our church about Black people in the Bible, the Black presence in the Bible. And I want to say, you would actually be hard pressed to find a white person in the Old Testament, right? And that's a surprise for a lot of people. When you say things like that, when you speak like that, the curse of Ham, which really wasn't a curse with regards to the entire Black race at all, right?
He misconstrued that.
It was used
I
to
never knew
say
that.
that we were all cursed, right? And if you read the text carefully, it says, "Cursed be Canaan." Canaan was one of Ham's sons. Ham was the father of Mizraim, which is Egypt, the father of Put, which is Libya, and the father of Cush, which is Ethiopia. They were not cursed, right? And if you look at the world today, Canaan doesn't exist, but those three nations still do. So the curse fell on one person, right? But it was applied, and there are still religious groups who say that we are actually cursed, right? Because of this curse of Ham. There are religious groups that actually say that we're fallen angels, and that's why our skin is black and it's a curse. So if we start to rebrand ourselves and actually go back and show people from the Bible, right? Again, you really don't see a whole lot of when you think about where the Bible was centered in the Old Testament, you're talking about, they call them Afro-Asiatics. So Abraham was an Afro-Asiatic. Moses was an Afro-Asiatic. Moses was married to Zipporah, who was an African woman. Joseph was married to an Egyptian woman. Rahab, who is one of Jesus's progenitors, she was a Canaanite, which also meant she was a Black woman, right? So all of these people in the Bible that we don't realize. Zephaniah, the prophet Zephaniah, starts off his book by saying he's the son of Cush, the son of Cushi, right? He was a Black man. If we actually go back and really look at the Old Testament and realize how much Black people there are in the Bible, and really rebrand ourselves and say, no, this isn't the way that the Bible was interpreted and given as a means to oppress and as a justifier of oppression, right? That's totally erroneous. And we need to go back and revisit it. As Esther was saying, education is so key where that is concerned. And Megan's point was just perfect, right? It can be very challenging for Black people to see the church as somewhere that is embracing when it was used to oppress for so long. So we need to really start rebranding ourselves so that we can reclaim the position as leaders in our communities.
Absolutely.
I think it's so interesting that it's ironic almost that, Black people, the enslaved at that time, were using scriptures as point of liberation, and the oppressors using it as a point of oppression. It's so ironic to see how the same verses can be misconstrued the way how you apply it. It's actually mind-blowing, because the same book, same verses, but I'm using it one way to interpret it as freedom and liberation, keep my spirits up. You're using it as to condemn me and to keep me down, and that is, it's funny, but not funny, but it's interesting,
It's funny.
But I think the constant that you've all have said is the role of the church has been a refuge, a safe haven, a stronghold. It still is today, and it should always be going forward. I think that's always been the constant. People within that can come and go, but God does not change. And his love and his mercy doesn't change. And that is the constant that we can always rely on the church and on God as our refuge in any moment of oppression. And I think that's the main constant that we've all observed throughout history, of course. And even to what you were saying, Megan, about decolonizing the church, and Greg talked about it a bit, I think it slides right into our next point. And I think it's so interesting, like I said, in the Black community, we're very divided. But looking at us here today on the panel, we are Black people living in Canada as Canadians, and we are of West Indian descent, right? And like I told you guys, a lot of times people, Canadians, West Indians, and other Black people will say, we don't care about stuff like that. That's not our history. That doesn't relate to us. And they don't actually see the similarities between all of our stories of freedom all connect, so I want to talk about the connections right now, the connections of the stories of emancipation for all of us, as Black Canadians of West Indian descent, talking about Canada emancipation and West Indian emancipation and Black emancipation. How can we connect these stories together, emancipation, to see constants, compare and contrast, to see the similarities, see that we all are one? How can we connect those stories?
I feel like it kind of already connects itself, because basically it's just saying that we're free from slavery, but we kind of all celebrated it in different ways. Like, if I'm not wrong, I think like Carvana and like Carnival and stuff like that is a way of showing that, free and like showing our pride.
Yeah, Caravana is
I
an
could be
expression
wrong, but I
of,
think
Caravana is definitely an expression of the people being liberated from the people from the white people back in the Caribbean, and they celebrated by masquerading as them, and black people, West Indians, to crack a good joke every now and then, so they were copycatting them. So that's why we play mass. That's why we have all these duvet in the morning and sugarcane, all that stuff. But absolutely, it's all connected. But how exactly do you think, and why do you think it's important to connect these stories of emancipation, from Black emancipation to Canadian emancipation to West Indian emancipation? Why do you think it's important to do that?
Well, I do think stories are important to pass down from generation to generation. But first, we do need to identify what took place, acknowledge it, and figure out how we can move forward. These are stories that bring us together. It's transgenerational. So when I listen to stories of my grandmother and my parents, I understand how they come about to navigate in this country, and then I can figure out how to navigate, and then I can also help, my future children when it's time for them to navigate in this world. So emancipation is understanding that my identity isn't confined to what my oppressors tell me I am. It's discovering and understanding my own history, my culture, and why it is Afrocentric, so I can help build my children up in the future.
See, and Megan is just saying some things that are just so pertinent. And Esther, what you said as well about the start of different celebrations such as Caravana and those kinds of things. And I'm not telling anyone to attend Caravana.
Disclaimer
out there. However, the challenge that we all face, first of all, colonialism, one of the key components of colonialism is to convince the colonized that they need to be colonized, right? And in the Caribbean, the British, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish did an amazing job of convincing the enslaved population that enslavement was something that they, and sorry, not just the Caribbean, but even in the United States as well, enslavement was held up as something that was necessary for Black people. They were told that there was no civilization in Africa, so it was the white man's burden to then bring them to the quote unquote New World and enslave them and thus civilize them, right? So there's the 3 C's. It was called, I think it was conquer, Christianize, civilize, right? And what you had even after enslavement ended in the Caribbean was this structure that was in place, this stratified society where Europeans were still on the top and still seen as the pinnacle of humanity, right? And everybody should be striving for that. So even after enslavement ended, you still had this belief that was really entrenched in Caribbean society that anything African is backward. Anything African should not be celebrated. And really, you hear them talking about the motherland or the mother country. They're talking about England often, right? When you're talking about Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, Grenada, places like that. When they're talking about the mother country, they're often talking about England. In Canada now, there's been a real push, or there was a real push between 1967 to 1971 to really rebrand Canada and make it the polar opposite of the United States. And with this rebranding, What you had was this erasure of history where many Canadians don't even want to know, sorry, don't know rather, or don't want to acknowledge that enslavement happened here in Canada for 200 years, much less the segregation that followed it, segregation in every facet of Canadian society. Even cemeteries were segregated in Canada. And you had the last segregated school closing in 1985, and that is the lifetime of most of your parents, and within my lifetime as well, right? So segregation and enslavement, the history of that in Canada is exceedingly real, but you have a lot of people that are denying it because Canada wanted to brand itself as a multicultural society, right? And as this polar opposite to the United States. So racism and segregation was then seen as an American problem and not a Canadian issue.
Exactly.
And we have this covert racism here that is in many ways even harder to fight because you don't see it coming. And you don't even know sometimes that it's happening to you, right? So for us, to go back to your question, really, we need to acknowledge what's happened to us first and foremost, and then use that as a jump off point to come together and to unify, because we have this shared history of oppression. But when you have a largely Caribbean population, amongst us anyways, right? Unfortunately, we don't talk about the indigenous Black population that we have that goes all the way back to 1606 here in Canada, right? But because the Caribbean population is the predominant population in Canada, the challenge is trying to get that population to understand that European society isn't the pinnacle, right? And isn't the standard that we need to measure ourselves against. And then also digging further and saying, okay, enslavement actually happened here in Canada and segregation actually was very prevalent here in Canada. We're fighting two barriers now, right? So we're getting people to acknowledge that enslavement happened, and we're getting people to understand that white civilization wasn't the pinnacle of civilization, and that the civilizations in Africa were thriving and doing exceedingly well prior to
we didn't need saving.
triangular slave trade, right? So there's so many layers that we have to peel back. And it really starts with you guys. I mean, well, us, I'm going to include myself with you guys, even though I'm older, right? But it really starts with us. And again, going back to Esther's point about education, right now, myself and my sister actually lead a webinar for educators. It's called See Us, Learn Us, Teaching the Black Canadian Experience. And it's basically teaching educators from Newfoundland, British Columbia, how they can infuse the Black Canadian experience in their pedagogy from kindergarten to grade 12 in every discipline. So not just in history or in geography, but in everything. It's in drama, in phys ed. And I'm talking way too long, so I'm going to stop. But really, right, what we're doing is trying to get teachers, because there's gaps in the teachers' education.
Yeah,
because they weren't taught about the real Black Canadian experience. Actually, as a matter of fact, for most of them, it's non-existent. So if there's gaps in the teachers' education, then there's going to be gaps in the kids that they're teaching in their education. So we're taking it to a level where we think that educators need to be educated so that they can give a full narrative with regards to the Canadian experience and how much Black people have contributed to the Canadian narrative, or to Canadian history.
Yeah.
I think it's so exhausting. I think that's why it's so exhausting being Black, because we're fighting our own battles, also trying to fight other people, trying to help the Indigenous people, trying to help Asian people who are facing discrimination, trying to help everybody else, while still trying to help ourselves and still heal. And we're still getting knocked down. I think that's why it's so exhausting, but we're so resilient. But not always. You don't always have to be, but we are resilient. And I think that is why also I want to phrase my wording properly when I say this. I
say it, and then after just change your words.
We don't always gotta be strong. How about I just say that? I'll just say that. We don't always gotta be strong, right? And I think a lot of times we need to choose our battles, because a lot of people think that, it's slavery, it happened how many years ago, it's done, you're fine. It's not. Still happening now, and people don't like to admit that. Like, even what Greg was just saying, with educators not being educated to teach our students. Even when I was in high school, a few years ago, right? I graduated 2017, but when I was in high school, I won't say the name of the school. They had no Black curriculum in any of this in any of the anything. No Black History Month. There was no history class. Like in civics, there's no mention of any Black accomplishments. No Black anything. And it took me and one of the only other four people in the school who were Black. It took me, another person, to actually start a Black History Club and to actually petition the school board to get Black History curriculum involved inside of that. And it finally came to effect. And still today, that's still happening. And we have to keep fighting these battles every day, and we have to always remain strong. But I want us to know that we don't always have to be strong. It's okay to be fragile. We don't have to be the strong Black woman. We don't gotta be the strong Black man. It's okay to be weak, and it's okay to hurt. So we can rely on each other to bounce back and be resilient and to keep forging and making those pathways in the world. I think that's why it's so important to know your history. Like what Marcus Garvey's quote said, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." That's such a deep quote. And we all need to know our roots, regardless if you're Black, white, yellow, red, whatever you are. It's important to know your history because you have to be founded in something. I think it's very important.
I actually just want to quickly add to the aspect of understanding your history. And Uncle Greg made some groundbreaking points about understanding, the colors and the curses. And I wanted everyone to to know about Fountain of Israel, which is a YouTube channel facilitated by this gentleman who sources everything from the Bible. And Fountain of Israel, my parents and I have been watching it, and it is so groundbreaking because we are understanding our true history and our true identity. And as Uncle Greg said, Europeans have done such a good job in centering whiteness, but also accelerating, the concept of anti-Black racism. A lot of white supremacy is actually founded on anti-Black racism. So it is our initiative as each and every single one of every single Black person to take the initiative to research, to explore, to understand, to have conversations. Because if we do not have these conversations in our homes, amongst our friends, or take the initiative to start resources and provide networks, we will stay stuck. And we cannot afford to stay stuck for the purpose of our future and the future generations. We have to take that initiative, and it is going to be a painful process. Trust me, like it is not easy, but I know God is going to be with us, giving us that strength every step of the way, whether you're the only Black person in your class, as Tiff mentioned, whether you're one of the few Black people, navigating in your journey. It is not going to be easy, but God is there to reinforce that strength so that you can continue the fight, because it is a fight. It really is a fight. So I encourage everyone, no matter how hard it gets, have conversations and share this knowledge. It's very vital.
And also, just to add to that point, as a person, I never grew up in a strong Black community. Matter of fact, where I live, there's no Black community at all. So the thing is that, now it's getting more integrated and stuff. But the thing is that I never knew anything about Black history. The thing is, what I learned was from Disney Channel, maybe a history textbook, digging in. There wasn't a lot of it. And the thing is that because I go to a public school, so everything's, mentioned by the board. It's not just a teacher trying to be rebellious and actually teach from their knowledge. So I lack that experience. And as a person, when I did see a person who looked like me in my school, it was very we rebelled from each other because there wasn't that strong of community. And the thing is that we also like to divide ourselves by saying some Blacks are whitewashed. And the thing is that that is very annoying, because the thing is that what people fail to understand about putting these divisions is that when you divide, even if you just divide by from that Black person or for that Black woman or for Black man, you are actually starting to create a way to divide your community, which is what we need to stop. Because the thing is that when you divide the community, you cannot conquer anything. And that is just a fact. The thing is that you see how when we celebrate right? You really think that one person could go, sorry, not to like refer to Caravana, but you really think one person could just go dress up and there would be so much cameras and people? That was not how it would go. The people would probably just laugh at them. But you see, the same thing is that even when they used to sit in the restaurants, when they used to get sprayed water on, as a team, they stepped together, they sat together, they watched each other get that pie thrown in their face, because that is a team. And that's just what we need to go as a community. We are a team. We cannot look at each other, oh, she's brown skin, oh, she's dark skin. She's like, we can't do that. We are a community, which is where knowledge has to come from. And the thing is that, as Tyffany is going to said, you don't always have to fake to be strong. And the reason why that is so important is because when you have that kind of attitude, you become poisonous into your community. Because the thing is that some people like me, I'm learning so much from just being a part of this talk right now. I didn't know half of these facts, and I'm glad that I know, because now I feel more confident about myself of being a Black person, because it reminds me how strong my people are and how strong I should strive to be. That being said, is that you should help just spread every knowledge that you can, no matter who they are, because at the end of the day, we are all against one system. Though like Europeans and stuff don't look, oh, okay, that's brown, like they don't separate us, they just say you're Black, point blank, period. When you click on, as when Canada says for the OSAP and stuff, they just say, okay, are you European? Are you Indigenous? They don't be like, oh, well, yeah, I'm an African American with Canadian. They don't do that. They don't care. If Black, you're Black. And that's what we have to remember, is that if that's how other people look at you, why in your mental state are you separating yourself? What makes you so different? And the thing is that it's even funnier that we do that, because if you go all the way back, no one really knows where we fully come from. Meaning that, like, yes, we could say, oh, yeah, we came from Africa, but no one really dissects, oh, yeah, Ethiopia. And then you can't really dissect that. No one has actually traced it back that far. So don't separate yourself for no reason. You need to remember that you are on a team. And the thing is that when God looks at us, God doesn't separate. Because if you actually look at it in the Bible, God doesn't always say, oh, this one was Black, this one was white, this one was Asian. God doesn't describe us like that, because at the end of the day, in his eyes, we're all his children. There's no separation needed. So that's what we also need to remember, is that, it's okay to admit that you don't know something and speak it out. And when you know that knowledge, it's okay to share it, because we're all fighting the same battle. We're all fighting the same battle. And that's what we also need to remember, and why education is so important in helping.
Sorry, I just want to jump in here really quick. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I did want to address one of the comments that came up from before. I think it's by Ron Burkett. I think it was super, it might be controversial, but I think it's super important. He said, an issue which is limiting the church's ability to have an impact currently is that a large percentage of educated Blacks are atheists.
Yeah.
That is deep.
So I'd love to address that guy's comment who has the same last name as me. So
I thought it was on a side account, a burner phone.
Yeah.
Banking mix up.
Name looks familiar. So that's a really interesting thing to say. And again, a lot of it is steeped in what Megan was saying before as well, the colonial perspective, right? So when we think about the way the church has been used to oppress, right? One of the things that they said was that Christianity was brought to Africa by white missionaries. And this actually is very erroneous. If you look at the day of Pentecost, if you look up in the New Testament, when they're talking about the day of Pentecost, there were people from Africa who were present as well, right? There were Libyans there. There were people from North Africa that were there. If you look at the history of the Egyptian Coptic Christian Church, if you look at the history of the Ethiopian Orthodox Christian Church, you're talking about going back centuries. So Christianity was not brought to Africa by white missionaries. Christianity was in Africa from the very beginning. As a matter of fact, Ellen G. White talks about the fact that during the Dark Ages and during the Crusades, Christianity in Africa was thriving. In addition to that, there are African religious systems that don't necessarily call themselves Christian, but they very much adhere to Christian principles and Christian doctrine. There's this one particular group I believe it's a people group in South Africa, and they call their God, the name of their God literally translates to the God with holes in his hands. And they're really talking about Jesus, right? Jesus who was crucified, but they don't call themselves Christians, but they baptize. They do a lot of the things that we do as Christians, right? But again, because of this, the way that colonialism has positioned Africa, is positioned as this dark continent that does not, didn't embrace Christianity and was uncivilized, and it was brought to Africa by Europeans. So there are a lot of Black intellectuals now and a lot of Black thinkers now that believe that to overcome oppression, that they have to do away with Christianity altogether. And that's where you get this ideology of atheism being the way to go in order to fight against this oppressive system that we've had, right? So that's where you find these challenges. And again, it's really steeped in going back and looking back at our history. You cannot call yourself a Christian if you're not a student of history, because the Bible is a history book.
Exactly.
Right. And there are a lot of people that are always lashing out against us going back and looking at our enslavement and those kinds of things, and saying, we just need to move forward and look at Black excellence. And as important as Black excellence is, and I'm a big advocate of Black excellence, you have to look at what happened to us in order to understand who we are now. There's a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and it's by a professor in the United States. Her name is Joy DeGruy. Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And in this book, what she's doing is outlining all of the challenges that we face now because of what happened during our enslavement. So she talks about how Black mothers often put down their daughters, right? And will say some negative things about their daughters. She was saying how she was at a meeting. It was a PTA meeting, Parent Teacher Association meeting. And this white parent was talking about her kid in this glowing way and saying, the kid's, achieving and accomplishing all these things. And then she said to this Black parent, "Oh, I heard that your child is doing well also." And the Black mother was like, "She's okay. She's just all right. She doesn't clean up as much as I'd like her to clean up around the house, this, that, and the next." And what Joy DeGruy was saying is that comes from Black mothers actually during enslavement having to protect their daughters from the slave masters who wanted to rape them. And they got this idea of if they put the daughter down and made her seem lesser than, then the slave masters would be less inclined to want to have them as concubines, basically, right? And sexually assault them and abuse them. So they adapted this defense mechanism where they would put their kids down all the time, in particular their Black daughters, so that they wouldn't seem so appealing to the slave, to the slave master, or the slave holders rather. So if we understood this about ourselves, right, you could see then how we would be able to function better now as a people. Right? All of these things where a Black man's masculinity was promoted by how many children that they could reproduce for the slave master, right? So that, or the slave holder rather, so that then the slave holder wouldn't have to go to slave auctions and buy new slaves. They would just use the Black man as a stud to produce and replenish their slave stock. Right, and then this gets passed down so that then Black male or Black masculinity then seems as though it's measured in how many women you can impregnate and how many children you can have. Right, then you can see the challenges that we're facing now. But people want to ignore that and just talk about excellence and just move forward. And I think we need to talk about both of them simultaneously. We need to talk about our excellence, but we also need to talk about the challenges that we face that shape some of the challenges that we have now, so that we can move past those.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Just a lot you just said that I didn't even know, but it's all making sense. And I think that is prime example of why you should acknowledge the past, acknowledge your history while moving forward. But you can't move forward if you don't know where you came from. And I think that's so important. And I think this is a call to action for all of us here on this panel to be those educated Black Christians and to go out there and educate people, accurately and, with proper information, but in Jesus' name, and to educate them on everything, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and also bringing in the factor of Christianity and bringing in just strength and hope and not always being removed from who we are, And I think that you said so much just now, and my mind is literally blown, like literally blown. And
Whatever
I
took your
know,
notes, but still,
and I know, I'm gonna ask it. So here's the last question. How can non-African Americans or African Canadians, how can non-Black people commemorate or celebrate or acknowledge Juneteenth? Right? How can, what do we think? How can people who are not Black commemorate and still celebrate these things? Because same with how we celebrate, we acknowledge the Holocaust, we acknowledge, Remembrance Day, we acknowledge, things that happen to other people's religions and cultures as well. How can other people who are not Black help to commemorate things like Juneteenth for us as well? How can they do that?
I feel like just being knowledgeable on the topic and actually wanting to learn and not mock it, because and also as Black people, though, we have to also let them want to know, meaning that we don't just yell a culture appropriation, and we don't just yell, oh, you're a wannabe, oh, they're trying to be Black. We have to let them know, you know what,
Educate
from this is that, and simple stuff, because Black people were involved in a lot of things. So it could be simple as like, oh yeah, the light bulbs, a Black person created the light bulb? They'll be like, really? And that's how you could easily shuck up a conversation. It doesn't always have to go like blah blah blah, this, your people are wrong. It doesn't always have to be like that. Education, same thing when you go to a teacher, right? I'm sure the teacher's not yelling at you and being, oh, you can't, I'll fail the test, like we need to do it again. Of course not. The teacher comes in, okay, this is the lesson today, blah, blah, blah. And that's the same thing how you should talk about it. Be like, just slip in little facts. And that's easily how they get educated.
So then, as per what you're saying, about appropriation, if there's any non-Black people watching this WestLINK, and they want to celebrate and help commemorate this holiday, what do you think? How can they do that in a way that's not appropriation? What can they do in order to do that?
Sorry. No, go, Megan.
I do think like it is everyone's duty to decolonize themselves. I know Uncle Greg was mentioning, we do need to unlearn a lot of mindsets that we carry with us. And it goes for everyone from the African diaspora, non-Black people. Unlearn a lot of the things that you think you know. And you can relearn the right way, relearn anti-Black racism, relearn, equitable information, relearn what is important, so that we can acknowledge important holidays like today. We can talk about it. We can encourage others on how to support Black folks who need that. So I think it's really, really pivotal to decolonize ourselves and relearn what is important.
Yes. So to piggyback on what Megan said there, I think if non-Black people want to commemorate and celebrate and acknowledge our holidays, I think what needs to happen is again what Megan was saying with the mindset. They need to stop seeing anti-Black racism as a Black issue and see it as a human issue. So if you want to celebrate and be a part of these things, the shifting of the mindset needs to be, okay, it's not that I'm just being a part of this thing because it's colorful and it's loud and it's exciting. It needs to be what these people are going through or what these people have gone through is not something that is just exclusive to them. It's a human issue, right? And if you look at human history prior to the transatlantic slave trade, right? Man's inhumanity to man really started all the way back when Cain killed Abel, right? Different people groups have oppressed other people groups all the way through history. This is the latest installment of it, right? So, when you look at all of when you look at the commandments and you see God saying, or telling the Israelites, look out for widows, right? Make sure that the widows aren't oppressed. And when Jesus was here and he was always talking about feeding making sure that everyone is fed and looking out for man has been inhumane to man all the way back as far as you can go. But anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism and all of these different ways that society has chosen to bifurcate itself. This is the latest installment of inhumanity versus inhumanity, right? So
Yeah.
really what we need to do is stop seeing these things as okay, anti-Asian hate, that's an Asian issue. No, that's a human issue,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Anti-Black racism, that's a human issue, and we all need to work to understand it so that we can eradicate it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, we've had such a riveting discussion today, but we are winding down to the end of today's program. So just very quickly, from each panelist, I want concluding thoughts, about 30 seconds or less. What have you gathered today? What do you want to leave today saying? Concluding thoughts. Megan, start with you.
I want us to have a plan, a call to action
Mm.
from this day, because
Mhm.
being proactive is what incites real change.
Yes.
So as we go throughout life, go throughout our journey, we recognize disadvantages, we recognize where needs to be change. Let's be proactive about it, and let's work together to really make effective change for our community, but to
Mhm.
enhance our society as it is, and our church, most importantly.
Mm.
Absolutely. Esther, concluding thoughts really quick. What do you want to leave today saying?
Today, a lot has been said, but I just hope that everyone takes this as an educational wake-up call as to
Hmm.
the fact that, look, this is Black history, regardless of whatever label you want to put on it. It's still Black, and that's still your people. No matter if you're white, Asian, whatever. Everyone has went through their own trials and tribulations, and that we need to understand as a people, that we can help each other out. You see how everyone has their flags representing their country? This flag that we have in the background represents Juneteenth, and let that be a
Mm.
call to be like, this is for our people, this is us, this is me, this infects everyone, and you need to remember that every action that you do has an effect. So try to change, try to be the Christian that you want to be, as in remembering to be an advocate for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Greg, concluding thoughts.
Well, in order to understand who we are and to realize who we can be, we have to acknowledge what we've been. And Juneteenth is an example of looking back to go forward, right? So to understand the struggle, right? And again, I keep harping on it, but to understand Black excellence and why Black excellence is important, we have to understand what we went through in order to be excellent, right? So if we go around, and Esther really made an amazing point when she said, when we're trying to educate others, it's not about we shouldn't be coming from a place of anger and scolding, right? So if we go around telling people, well, acknowledge the first Black Canadian Governor General, and she's important and blah blah blah. If we don't acknowledge the struggle that went before that, then her accomplishment becomes very trivial, right? It becomes very like, okay, so she's the first Black Canadian general. Who cares, right? If we don't understand the struggle that went in order, that had to happen in order to put her in the position that she was in, right? Then it just becomes another, that's good for you, right? Pat on the back. So when that's why I really don't like when in Black History Month we trivialize it to these little snackable information bites, right? Where it's like, hey, did you know that a Black person invented this? Hey, did you know a Black person invented that? And as young Black, it's like, well, so what, right? But if we really bring to them, hey, this is what you all, or this is what others tried to do, right? And try to use in order to continue to keep us oppressed. And this is what we did in order to break free from that. Then every accomplishment is that much more paramount. Every accomplishment deserves that much more celebration because we understand the struggle behind it. So Juneteenth then becomes very relevant because we understand what needed to take place in order to have a celebration like Juneteenth, so that we can continue to go forward and move forward as a people and progress.
Exactly.
I love that.
And just me personally, I would charge all of us here on this panel and everyone within the sound of my voice on watching WestLINK, if you're going to watch it later, I would charge everybody to be the change you want to see in the world. And that applies to anything, Black history, human history, whatever history it is. And just like what Greg was saying, so many things apply to that statement. Racism is not a Black issue. sexism is not a women's issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like xenophobia is not an Islamic issue. It is a
Yeah.
human issue, right? And that is something we have to look at. It's a humanistic approach to things. We can't keep dividing ourselves, or we will never advance as a people, as a nation, as humans, period. Right? And what I want to leave everybody with is educate yourself, right? So as we educate ourselves, we can educate others as well. So when we see things happening, we can call them out and educate, and not always point to, oh, you're being racist, oh, appropriation. Let's educate people so they don't do it again. And then after that, then we can say you're being racist and we can tell appropriation.
Yeah.
But you have to educate. That is the first step, is to educate people. But you have to educate yourself first. And
Yeah.
I want to leave all of us with Romans 8, verse 37, which says, yet in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us.
Amen.
And
So we're just going to have a prayer. I'm going to ask Esther to pray for us as we close off this program.
And everyone bow your head and close your eyes for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for just allowing us to wake up this morning. And thank you, Lord, for just having us bestow this knowledge upon us and about who is watching us right now. Lord, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity that everyone had to speak and share their opinions and their education with us, so that we know that the facts that now we are getting is true and it's not just trivial. And so we could share it at the world and know that we have at least a foundation to start on, so that we can start being more knowledgeable on certain topics. Lord, we just thank you for everything that you have done for us. And I pray that everyone now starts acknowledging not just Black history and just history, that we just start understanding that it's history and that it's a part of us, and that we now try to track down and share this knowledge at the world, so that when you come, we are knowledgeable and we can understand and we can hold hands of what we speak about in the Bible, so we can make this true. Thank you, Lord, for everything you have done, and thank you, Lord, for just being you. And please stop this division between us and help that we can stop it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I want to thank all my guests for coming on today. Megan, Esther, and Greg, great
Thank you.
insights. Thank you for coming and spreading information and educating myself and others as well. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching WestLINK, who tune in when all the weeks when it comes on. Please like, follow, share, subscribe, and comment on this WestLINK for more. Tell us your ideas in the comments. We want to know what you want to talk about, and we will present them to you. Subscribe to our newsletter so you can stay up to date on our next WestLINK, our next topics, our next times, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
bye. Take care.